Hi everyone, this is Ryan and we're doing lesson 5 of working with JavaScript. In this lesson we'll be learning all about arithmetic operators, and here I'm linking to an external JavaScript file called lesson5.js, and I have my div tag once again to do some output. In my JavaScript I'm going to carry on with the idea of using an anonymous function. This will execute once the document is finished loading. So let's start by declaring two variables. And we're going to do some calculations with these variables. So we create an output to our div, num1 plus num2. So we've already used the plus in previous examples, previous exercises, where we took two strings and we concatenated them together. In this case, however, we're actually taking two numbers and performing a mathematical calculation on them by adding the one number to the other number. So 10 plus 5 is 15. If, however, we had quotes around one of these numbers, that would turn that integer into a string and give us a completely different answer. Now we'd end up with 105. So in this context, the plus is actually seeing a string and it's then concatenating the other value to that, resulting in another string. Some cases in JavaScript you have no choice but to work with a string. So for example, if you're working with a form and you retrieve this value from a form, when you retrieve a value from a form, it always comes back as a string. So if you wanted to do a calculation with that value, you would need to convert it to an integer first. And the way we do that is we use a built-in function in JavaScript called parseInt. Okay, so that string has now been converted to an integer. The way parseInt works is it actually looks inside of a string and it grabs the integer from the beginning of that string. So you still end up with the same answer. If I had 10.5 eggs, parseInt would still only look for a integer. Remember, integer is a whole number, so it would only grab the 10. I'd still end up with the same answer. If however I used parseFloat, I would actually be able to get the floating point value. So it would come back with 10.5, and then it would be able to add 10.5 plus 5, giving me an answer of 15.5. So remember these two functions, very useful, parseInt and parseFloat. When you are working with a string and you need to do a mathematical calculation with that, you would need to first extract the integer or float value from the beginning of that string before you could do a calculation on it. Alright, let's go back to looking at some of the other operators. I could subtract the two numbers. Give me 5.5. I could multiply the two numbers. We use a little asterisk for that. I could divide the one number by the other number. And one that you may not have come across before is the modulus operator. So the way modulus works is it determines the remainder when you divide the one number by the other number. So 10 divided by 5 is 5, remainder 0. 5 goes exactly twice into 10 with nothing left over. Whereas if I had to say 6, 10 divided by 6, the remainder would be 4. Because 6 goes into 10 once and 4 is left over. So when you come across the percentage sign, it stands for modulus, which gives us the remainder. Okay, so now if I create a more complex calculation, for example, I could say 10 plus 5 multiplied by 3. An interesting thing happens. I get 25. a lot of people would expect to get a completely different value. The reason why we get this value is because the order in which the operations are performed is something known as Botanist. Now you may have come across this term before. Botanist stands for brackets, orders, division, multiplication, addition, and subtraction. Okay, so in maths, the 5 multiplied by the 3 will take place first, before the addition. See, multiplication occurs before addition. Okay, so 5 times 3 is 15. 15 plus 10 is 25. There's our answer, 25. But if we had to put brackets around the first part of the calculation, brackets actually take place before anything else. So whatever's in brackets will take place first. So 10 plus 5 is 15 times 3 is 45. Watch out for this when working with calculations that contain more than one operator. Remember that certain operators take place before other operators. Okay, so orders would be anything like square roots of a number or a exponent of a number that takes place before the division and multiplication. And then last but not least is addition and subtraction. So you can almost think of division and multiplication on the same level as each other. They kind of have the same order in the hierarchy, and then addition and subtraction would also have the same order in the hierarchy. I think the moral of the story is, when in doubt, always use brackets, and that way you'll never go wrong. Brackets, you know, will always take place first, and will just get rid of any confusion that may arise. Another interesting operator that we get in JavaScript is the short form of all the other operators. So for example, if I wanted to add 5 to that number, I would go num equals num plus 5. I would then be able to output the value to my div 15. So instead of having to use a separate variable, I'm actually reusing the same variable. Should have declared that variable. But I'm saying the new value of num is equal to the old value of num plus an additional 5. A shortcut for this would be to say num plus equal to 5. Still get the same answer. The plus equal to you probably came across earlier on when we spoke about concatenating the value to the end of the div. That was in the context of two strings. Now we are talking about two numbers. And we also get all the other operators as well, the short form, minus equals, multiply equals, divide equals. So this would mean 10 minus 5. Okay, so another another interesting operator is we could say num plus plus, that would add 1 to the previous value of the variable, and then I'm left with 11. Or I could minus minus, which would subtract 1 from the previous value of the variable, giving me 9. So this ends our lesson in working with arithmetic operators.